So, what I wanted to say was I watched two movies. I watched Nightmare Alley, the new Guillermo del Toro film. I'm awful with pronunciations. Please forgive me. I am terrible with everyone's names. So it came out on HBO maybe like last week. I would say the best thing about the movie was that it had a star-studded cast. Oh, this is so nice. I'm at my computer so I can look it up real quick. It already knew what I was looking for. Oh no, so it was the 2021? Oh, it's in theaters? Well, it's on HBO Max. So, HBO Max always wants to put stuff in the theaters as well as, stream it. So it works out well for me. But star-studded cast. Bradley Cooper, Kate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, Toni Collette, Paul Anderson, like William Dafoe, Ron Perlman, star-studded cast. Richard Jenkins, like, I was just always like, wait, is that? Every 5 seconds, it was someone new that I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know y'all were in this film. But it's about this man who we open up and he's setting something on fire and then running away from his home. So I was like, well, he's obviously having a hard time. But we see that he, runs off to the circus. So my thoughts about the circus. I don't really have a lot of thoughts about the circus. I'm not super into like the history of the circus. It doesn't seem to be all that great. I did hear a little bit about it when, what was that show? The Greatest Show? The Hugh Jackman film came out and everyone was like, oh my gosh, the circus, and look at that. Yeah, they're accepting of who they are. And then it was like, yeah, the real circus was not like that at all. The real circus was terrible. But we see some of that in this film because we get there and it's obvious that they are taking advantage of individuals, that they are being slightly abusive. I say slightly abusive to some folks, but just straight up abusive to others. And we find the main character, his name is it Stan? I see it's Stanton. I'm trying to get it. Stan Carlisle, who's played by Bradley Cooper. That's the main character. And after he set something on fire and then ran away, he goes off to the circus and he's watching some of the acts and he sees some of the folks and what they're up to and what they're doing, what they're offering. And he goes into, now I did not know the history of the word geek. I was just like, I just always thought it was a nerdy person, millennial here. Never looked into it too much, but they were like, oh, come see the geek here. And you have this man who I'm like, well, they're clearly torturing this man. They have him locked up in a cage. And the whole act is that he is human, but he's like a subhuman. He's wild and uncivilized and unsocialized, which is basically just coded wording to say that unintelligent and unskilled and lesser than. And they have this man come out and they play up this whole, it's a special time, it's his feeding time, and this is the only way that he'll eat, and we don't even think he has to eat. He can live for months without eating. And I was like, that sounds like torture. That does not sound real. If you're actually doing that, you're literally just starving this man and torturing him. But he comes out and he does what they want. And you can tell, which I felt so bad. It's Paul Anderson who plays the original geek. I felt so bad because you could tell that he didn't actually want to do it. He didn't want to chase down a chicken in this little pen and then bite the chicken's head off. Like that was, what they're saying is obviously not true. But that's kind of their tagline of how they draw in people to watch that performance and how they treat this individual. So you see that, and then you see they're trying to get their money. They're like, oh, it's not even a whole dollar, it's just a quarter. Bradley Cooper though ain't paying. Bradley Cooper's wanders off. He goes, and William Dafoe is the main kind of manager for the circus. Or is it a circus? I don't know why I think it's a circus. It's not a circus. It's a carnival. Thank you. It's a carnival. The main manager or person for the carnival. And so we see Bradley Cooper trying to get in good with him. Obviously, Bradley Cooper's Stan the character is a grifter, is someone who is stealing and plotting and scheming and cheating. And we see him run across Rooney Mara, who plays Molly's role, and we can tell that he likes her, but that she's more passive than what he's looking for because he's on the come up. We see him run across Toni Collette's character named Xena, who plays a mystic, along with her husband, David Stratham, whose name is Pete in the show. And they basically have these coded, they use words and codes to be able to signal to each other information about people in the audience that they either gather or they ask them, or that the people in the audience supply, so that they can act like they are receiving messages from beyond, from spirits and stuff. But it's just basically a big scam. And so Bradley Cooper's Stan, the character, gets super into it. He's like, I could totally do that. And so he starts kind of doing an apprenticeship a little bit with Pete and messing around with Xena, and also trying to get in good with Molly, who has protector, Ron Perlman's character, Ron. And Molly's character is, she basically gets electrocuted and they run a current through her, and it's like, oh, she's this mystical magic person who can channel electricity and all this other stuff. So he makes a really nice performance for her. He like steps her game up and he tells her, I like you, I want to be with you. When you're ready, let's leave. And she's just like, no. And Ron Perlman's like, leave her alone because you are not who you need to be. And Stan, Bradley Cooper's character, basically takes advantage of Pete because Pete is an alcoholic, and alcoholism plays a really important role in this. You see a lot of significance around drinking alcohol, and alcohol seems to represent not only just the release of inhibitions, but really as like a signal of loss of control and of giving into your demons, which I also find to be interesting because tarot plays a small part in this. Toni Collette's character reads tarot, and so she reads his cards at different times. But Stan is all like, well, I don't drink. But eventually we do see that he starts drinking as he starts giving into his demons and kind of falling back into his old ways and doing things he probably shouldn't be doing. So Pete teaches Stan a little bit of his tricks and things like that, but he carries this book around and he keeps it with him all the time. And he likes to drink, but he really shouldn't be drinking. He is obviously not well. And eventually, Stan gives him some alcohol and Pete drinks himself to death. Or I'm not sure if he like poisoned him, but I know that like something happened between Stan giving Pete the alcohol and Pete dying, and it's connected to Stan. So we see that now Stan is like, okay, well, I can be the one who, does this. I can take on this role. And Xena, Toni Collette, is just like, I'm over it. That was my husband. He did all of this. And so we see then, so the sheriffs come to town or come to the carnival to shut them down. And Stan does this whole reading of them. And he basically saves everyone in the carnival. And William Dafoe's character, that manager, is really impressed. And so he starts telling him kind of some of the tricks about how he manages and runs and gets people involved in the carnival. And he tells him kind of the story of how you get the geeks, those ones that really don't have anything to offer, and that because they're at that really, really low point, you can take advantage of him. And he tells Stan that what you do is basically say you don't have anything for them to do. They're desperate. They're alcoholics or they're on drugs or something. They're desperate. And William Dafoe's character's name is Clem. And Clem tells him about, alcohol is one thing. And during the wars, people got into poppy. But, the alcohol is really the one that gets them in, that draws them in. And he was saying you put just a little bit of something into the alcohol, and then you give them that, and then slowly you get them hooked on it, the opium, so that they are addicted. And then basically you take it away from them. So now they either perform for you, do these terrible acts of killing animals and biting off chicken heads, or they have to go through the withdrawals. And that's why in the beginning, Paul Anderson's character looks so haggard, was because he's basically going through drug addiction withdrawals. And the only way that he gives him some of the drugs is for him to do the act. And he told him that the really important thing is to tell them that it's only temporary until they find like a real a real person, a real geek who is actually like that type of individual, but they don't exist. It's all a scam. It's all a scam, and that's what you learn about this whole thing, is that it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all an illusion. There aren't any real geeks. They make them. And that's how they do it, that's how he does it, at least, is through this idea of offering them a temporary position and getting them addicted to drugs until basically they either OD or they die from withdrawals or something like that. So eventually Molly is like, hey, Stan, I'm here for it. Let's go. So Stan gets the book that has all of the tips and tricks in it from Dead Pete, and they go off to the city, and then they start the show. They're doing 2 shows a night. They're really super popular. They run across these folks, and then we eventually meet Kate Blanchett's character, whose name is Lilith, which I did not realize that, so that's kind of interesting because she does kind of become a Lilith-like character if you're aware of the mythology behind the name Lilith, or the entity Lilith. But basically, Lilith challenges them and calls them out and says, I don't think that you have any type of psychic powers or connections to spirits or anything like that. I think that you have a code, you have a verbal code between yourself and Molly, and that's how you trick people. And she calls him out in front of everybody, but he's able to use the tips that he learned from Pete to read her, and he figures out like she holds up her gold bag and says what's in the bag. She doesn't let Molly speak. She wants to say it herself, and then that's how she gets, but he reads her, so he's able to still call it out. And so then she plays, Lilith is a psychotherapist or a psychologist, PhD, and she's like, here, I have this one guy who's in the audience, and he lost someone. They lost their child, and they're devastated. He wants to see if you're real, see if you can get in touch with the spirits. Gives Stan her card. Now Molly's like, I know this, like, there's something weird going on between you two. Stan's like, okay, maybe me and her can try to do something together so that we can make even more money. And he goes and visits her, and they decide to do a little team up to steal people's money from them. And so Lilith is a very slick, sly character. She's obviously very worldly, obviously knows her way around things, and is really in it for herself to get what she wants to get out of it. And she starts connecting, and since she's a psychologist and people are telling her all of their, deepest, darkest secrets, their inner thoughts and workings and the things they've done, she uses that and gives that information to Stan, who can then go and pretend like he's getting messages from the beyond and trick people into giving them their money. So they're making lots and lots of money from this, and eventually they run into Richard Jenkins' character, Ezra Grindle, who is like devastated because there was a woman he had a relationship with. He couldn't be with her. He has her have an abortion, pretty much. She does not keep a child, and she kills herself. So he feels really guilty about this. He's built this big old garden about it, and he just wants to kind of make up for what he's done, but also like he has this bitterness and anger that's been growing inside of him that he doesn't have a clue as to what to do with it. And so Stan is like, that's a perfect mark. Let me go after him. I can use the information because Ezra was Lilith's patient, and so they have background on him, but Lilith is like, this is not someone you want to mess with. He has this bodyguard who is not playing games, and Ezra is just giving Stan lots and lots of money, and eventually he's like, I want you to manifest. Oh, I'm trying to remember what her name was. I just forgot what her name was. Trying to manifest the woman who he was with who died. And Stan, being an idiot, is like, oh, yeah, I'll make it happen. Which obviously, like, he's not doing any of this. But he tries to convince Molly that she can dress up, and they'll do, like, a illusion to trick him into it. And so eventually Ezra is like, you have to make this happen. I've paid you all this money. Stan is trying to bully Molly into doing it. He basically like runs her down to do it. Molly tries to leave. He goes and he manipulates her into coming back, which made me really angry. I hated this scene. It was the scene at the train station. And I was just like, Molly, girl, what are you doing? Like, you gotta go, sis. This is not healthy. This man is not here for you. This man does not care about you. But he convinces her to come back. And Molly tells a story about when she would have the currents running through her, that when it first started, it really hurt, but eventually she just kept telling herself to numb herself to it, and it would go away. But she always knew when it was done, when she couldn't take anymore, and she was like, I am done. So Stan's mad, but he's like, she's gonna do it, so I'm just gonna, whatever, I don't need her. He brings Ezra out to that garden. He puts the bodyguard out. He's like, hey, yo, you go over there. Now, mind you, he had lied to the people who have been looking for their dead son, and that woman goes, it's Mary Steenburgen. She kills them because she's trying to go see her son again. So like, you're seeing this fall apart as the prediction of Xena, who comes to visit. Xena and Bruno, they come to visit them, says in her tarot cards, and he pulls 3 cards, and he pulls the Tower, which basically means destruction. So they got that interpretation correct. He then pulled the Lovers or the Devil. I couldn't tell which one it was, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. Both of them are about like unhealthy attachments. And then he pulled the Hangman, but it was the Hangman in reverse. And the Hangman to me is just like never a positive card. I hate that card. I get it all the time. But the way she didn't explain what the Hangman stood for. I think they were trying to say that it was literally like a hanged man. But the Hangman is really about having to relinquish control and go with the flow a little bit and understand that like what is happening needs to happen and you need to let it play out, and that you have to change your perspective around things. That's why he's literally upside down. But in the reverse, it's saying that you have a little bit of a clearer vision about things, stuff like that, which I felt like did not match up with what was going on in the story. So I feel like they could have probably picked a better card. I would have honestly have picked something that was like the 5 of Wands, which is a very combative card, or I would have picked a Swords card. Any of the Swords card, 9, 10, anything like that would have been a fantastic, especially the imagery for the 9 of Swords would have been great, or the 10 of Swords. So I felt like they were better cards. But anyways, he's living through this tarot reading that he got. So he's trying to get Molly. He gets her down there. They're trying to play through this whole trap. And he was going to get Ezra to go and pray. And then he was going to, say he felt so bad and all of that. Repent for what he's done. And while he was down there praying with his head down, Molly, as the dead woman, was going to leave. Ezra don't want to listen to him. Ezra runs up to Molly in her disguise, and he's just like, wait, you're not the person. What is this? And she's all like, I'm so sorry. I can't do this. And he's like, you lied to me. You're cheating me. Oh my goodness. And Stan just goes like wild and starts, because Ezra hit Molly, but even then, like, Stan goes wild and starts just beating him up and ends up killing him. So we see the bodyguard come back, because the bodyguard was always just like, I don't trust you. I will really hurt you if you do something to Ezra. Woo! So they run. Molly and Stan run back to the car that they have waiting for them. Bodyguard comes chasing after them, shoots at Stan, and Stan runs this man down with this car. And he pulls old school. Like, if he was in a horror movie, Stan would make it, because Stan hits him at first, like backs up and hits him, and then when he's down on the ground, bodyguard's down on the ground, Stan comes back and hits him again and runs over him. And so then he goes off to some alley, starts knocking out the windows. Molly's like, what are you doing? What is happening here? You've lost your mind. And he's like, I gotta make it look like the car was stolen. No one will ever think it was us. And Molly's like, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And she gets up to leave, and he's just like, but we had to do it. They were going to kill us. I don't need you. I don't need you. So he runs now to Lilith. Now, Lilith is like, okay, no one saw you come here, right? And so he had been showing up like he was one of her patients, but he never had appointments or anything like that. Like, she would just be like, hey, come over now. But he didn't have an appointment like he was actually a patient of hers or something or anything like that. So Lilith is, putting some of the money that's in the safe into the bag, which I was like, girl, I thought you were going to keep that money. And then they have been kind of having this tit for tat, because he had said that she wasn't strong enough to take him on. What a fool, because Lilith has been working this whole thing. She has basically set it up to make it seem like he's a disgruntled patient, that he has experienced transference, which is basically where a client or the therapist develops feelings, like romantic feelings, for their therapist or their client. So there's a transference of emotions where it shouldn't be emotional. It's just that this person is helping you. But, if someone's finally listening to you, now you feel cared for. And she's basically just going to play it off like he came and attacked her and stole her, and she's going to get him locked up. So Stan's freaking out. He starts wanting to fight her and stuff. She calls the police. She pulls out the gun. She's like, I got you now. Like, who's strong enough now? And I was like, oh, she a boss. She a boss. And the security comes up, and so Stan runs away. So now Stan's got, no money, because he looks in the bag. Sis was not putting all that money in that bag. She had traded out all of the like tens of thousands of dollars they had gotten and traded all those bands out for ones. So it was literally just singles. So it was probably like maybe $1,000 when this Ezra man was offering him like $10,000 a month. And he had been working with him for a while. So they had a lot of money saved up. She had basically like just switched out for like $1,000. And he was like, you played me. So he has no money now because he's running away because security's coming after him. Lilith has the money. Lilith still has her life. She's doing her thing. Molly is gone. And Stan's just out here like on the run for his life. He gets on a train car and pulls out a chicken coop thing, which I'm like, oh, the symbolism is there, fool, because you're about to be out there with these chickens. Pulls out a chicken coop thing. And I was like, you couldn't bet... I don't care if it is only $1,000. You needed that money. You had no money. He didn't grab money. He didn't grab a coat. And it's the middle of the winter time, snowing everywhere. And he's just lying on the bottom of this train car. So then we see that like Stan is not right. Stan has a lot of anger and animosity. He basically killed his father, and Lilith talks about this a lot and tries to keep drawing it back to, you have these issues with elderly men. We see that he killed Ezra. We see that he killed Pete. We see that he's like kind of been going back and forth a little bit with William Dafoe's character. We see that he clearly just has issues with older men. And it's because of the animosity and the really horrible relationship he had with his father. He basically kills his father and leaves him to die, opens up the window, lets him freeze, lets him have like a heart attack or something, takes his watch, which was his father's prized possession. He's really attached to watches and into the whole time thing. And it's also when he's with Lilith that he starts drinking. So again, we see that he's given into his demons that he had put away before. So he's in that freight train and he starts just living with the homeless folks, and he comes out and they have a fire going and everything. I was like, well, okay, maybe he's doing like all right, I guess. No, he's not. Broke, homeless. He's at the fire. They tell him no more just freeloading. You have to contribute. You need to pay your dues here. So he gives them the watch. So this is literally, now he is at like rock bottom. He has nothing. Even after all that stuff he had done to learn how to steal and to grift and to pull these illusions, he has nothing left over now because he would not let go of that need to be more than what he could have been, doing things using his own skills and his own even just charm that he had. He could have just hung out and ran the illusions with Molly. He could have even just continued to run some scams with Lilith, but like told these people the truth that there are things I cannot do. And that was what Pete had really warned him in the beginning was, you have to watch, because if you start to believe your own illusions, that is when you will fall. That is when you will fail. That is when you will lose everything. And that's exactly what ended up happening. He bought into his own egotistical stories that he had been telling himself since he was young, that he deserved to have all of these things, the things that his father had taken from him, the things that the society had taken from him. Like, he deserved to have these things no matter how he had to go about getting them. So he finds himself at another carnival. And so he's going in there. He's gross and dirty, because he doesn't have anywhere to stay. And not even the homeless folks want him because he doesn't want to, work and get his keep. He wants things to be kind of given to him and for him to just be able to charm his way into it. He doesn't want to necessarily work for it. So he works his way to another carnival, and we see there that there was a fetus that William Dafoe's character had, and we see it's there, and the new manager of this carnival is saying that he got it from one that's closed down. So we know that the one that he was previously at, where this kind of all started, has closed down. And of course, the tides are turning with things. There just was a declaration of war starting. And so, things are tense anyway. And the guy is just like, well, the new manager is telling Bradley Cooper's character, I don't hire drunks. I don't hire alcoholics, and I can smell the liquor on you. And then he's telling him, you know, you need to like get cleaned up and stuff. And he was like, I don't care if you do have an act. I don't care how great you are. Like, you are in no state to be able to try to have an act. Like, you're basically just a drunk. And so what we find is that the new manager tells him, well, I mean, there is something you can do. You know, it's what we have, people that don't have any skills and, you know, can't really get anything else going on. And I'll give you some alcohol if you do it. And I'll give you some food and some room and things if you do it. You know, you won't be living the best life, but you won't be homeless anymore. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like, yeah, but you know, it's only a temporary position until we find a real geek. And you see like the realization that Stan's character has gone through this cycle and pretty much put himself into this very role that he'd been fighting against his entire life, of denying that animalistic side of him, but also like pushing up against society's understanding of who he could be, and in lying and cheating and stealing and killing to try to get away from that. He's literally put himself right into that role of how he thought that everyone saw him and was trying to force him to be, as opposed to like what he actually could have been. And so he starts laughing, and he starts crying, and then he starts laughing. And the guy's like, you know what a geek is? And he's like, yeah, I do. And, you know, he's having his little breakdown. Stan's having his little breakdown. And then Stan says, I was born for this role. Woo! So that was pretty much the end of the story. That is Nightmare Alley. I thought it was really good. It was a little slow. Honestly, it was a little slow. It's a little long. It's two and a half hours. But once it picked up and once you got into like the meat of things, I was like, okay, this is a pretty good story. This is really interesting. So if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you interpret Stan's journey a little differently than I did. I don't have, you know, a masculine experience, so I'm not 100% sure of how that looks, but I thought it was fascinating. The women that he interacted with oh my goodness, Toni Collette's character, with Mara Rooney, whatever that lady's name is, Rooney Mara's character, and then Cate Blanchett's character, and how these kind of go through this cycle. Even if we're looking at kind of Eve and Lilith and relationship together, and more of like a Mary and mother and all these other things, like such an interesting relationship to see how that flowed through his relationship with these women and the relationship with the men, and how he eventually like found himself in this terrible position when he had opportunities to do so much more. So anyways, it was a great show. So thanks for watching another Movies with Mila. I will see you all next Friday for another one. I'll see you later. Bye.